The only thing necessary for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing. It's important that people wake up to what is going on. It's time that we read the Constitution. It is error that needs the support of government. Truth can stand alone. That was given to us by Thomas Jefferson. Well, thank you for watching. My name's Daniel. This is The Real Story. And for you new viewers, I hope you just stay tuned so you can catch what we have this evening. I'm going to do kind of like a 9/11 revisited. When I first started the show, I thought, gee, what can I do to make people at least question things that don't make sense so that they raise their awareness. And so now I was thinking, it was actually a John Lennon song of all things. It was, I think, one of the Christmas songs where, you're another year older and, and what have you done? So I was thinking, it's been about a year since I did my 9/11 shows. And in that time, what's changed? What have I learned? What could I, help you learn and understand, or at least help you ask questions so that maybe you would learn and you'd even care. So, once again, it's been about a year. I came out, when I say came out, I came on the show and I tried to describe to people that there were some inconsistencies, some coincidences that didn't make sense. Like, how do these guys with box cutters get on an airplane without a boarding pass? Yet we miraculously find their passport, okay, where? On the ground, after the plane impacts. Then I asked questions like, well, is it a coincidence, I guess, that they were running drills, crashing planes into buildings, let alone the Pentagon and the World Trade Center, that very day? Is it a coincidence that we weren't able to get a fighter aircraft up and, the United States military, right, trillions of dollars spent, couldn't, do their job that one day of protecting America, Is it a coincidence that the president's brother was in charge of security at the World Trade Centers, Marvin Bush, and his cousin, Whit Walker III, remember George Herbert Walker Bush, remember the Walker family? Okay, is it a coincidence that Larry Silverstein, made $7 billion that day when America suffered? All these coincidences, Is it a coincidence that these supposed hijackers couldn't fly? Is it a coincidence that they were trained at United States military bases? Was it a coincidence that the ISI, that's the Pakistani secret police, like we got the CIA, they got the ISI, that they, a general of the ISI had wired $100,000 to Muhammad Atta the night before? Is that a coincidence? Is it a coincidence that all these people came in through, quote, Canada, yet we're building a fence down in Mexico, and yet we're still full of illegal aliens? We don't guard our borders, but you have to take your shoes off when you fly. Is it a coincidence that the anthrax that was released shortly after to put the fear in the America? Remember all the colors? Red, blue, green, fuchsia, lime, olive drab, right? All those had a thing for terror and worry for you and for your family. Is it a coincidence that that anthrax came from our own labs at Fort Detrick, Maryland? Is it a coincidence that the people that made money from this were the ones who always make money from wars? Is it a coincidence that it has benefited them and not us? Is it a coincidence that, if you were in the oil industry, you've made record profits? Is it a coincidence that the dollar's tanking? And I mentioned a year ago, maybe if you watch the show or you watch the intros, I said, well, gee, these globalist banker type people, the Federal Reserve created by bankers for bankers, not by the people for the people, right? Yeah, is it a coincidence that they're making money hand over fist at this? Is it a coincidence that they didn't bother investigating 9/11 until they were forced to by survivors? When I say survivors, women who had lost their husbands. I recommend you watch that movie I showed here on Sharon Cable, which I called, Press for Truth. Gee, is it a coincidence that buildings never collapsed? When I say iron, steel reinforced buildings never collapsed, let alone an asymmetrical, perfect collapse into their footprints, okay, in history, never before in history. Is that a coincidence? Is it a coincidence that, they found the steel at World Trade cut at 45-degree angles, and it was sulfidized, and sulfur's not used in making steel? Is that a coincidence? Is it a coincidence that professors have done, electron scan microscopes of this steel and found that there was little microspheres that, of all things, had the elements that you find when making and utilizing thermite and thermate. That's what demolition companies use to take down buildings. You know? So once again, is it a coincidence that the president's brother was in charge of security of all the facilities? Was it a coincidence that they got rid of the bomb-sniffing dogs before then? Was it coincidence that the supposed pilot, okay, of the American Airlines flight that smashed into the Pentagon or whatever, that Mr. Burlingame, that he had practiced drills of planes smashing into the Pentagon during his naval career? Boy. Was it coincidence that of the 5 sides of the Pentagon, this Hani Hanyor hijacker decided to hit the side that had the accountants in it, not the side that had Donald Rumsfeld or any leader? And was it a coincidence that on September 10th, 2001, Donald Rumsfeld informed you and CBS, and by the way, the Congress, that trillions were missing and unaccounted for from the Pentagon? Was it a coincidence that Building 7, not struck by a plane, collapsed in its own footprint? Was it a coincidence that that was the largest building housing CIA people other than Langley, Virginia, the home of the CIA? Is it a coincidence that that was the largest Secret Service facility outside of D.C.? You know, could it have been a coincidence that the FBI, CIA had big bases in this Building 7, this Solomon Brothers building? Was it a coincidence that the SEC, the Security and Exchange Commission, had stored all the records from the Enron and WorldCom? And I don't know if you remember, but that's right, there was a NASDAQ crash that investors in America lost $7 trillion. So the Pentagon's missing trillions, the market's missing trillions, and where did we store the records? In Building 7. Also known as the Solomon Building, because the Solomon, you know, I don't want to say Solomon Brothers, but the bankers, Solomon or whatever, okay, Solomon Brothers Banking, they had possession of that building. Is it a coincidence that Rudy Giuliani's command bunker was in Building 7? Is it a coincidence that he ran out of the building and wasn't there and said that, oh, well, that building's going to collapse? Is it a coincidence that there was a countdown? Is it a coincidence that now fire departments demolish buildings? Why don't you ask our fire chief if he's got the ability to, you know, he knows any fire department in the United States who can demo out a building? Okay, was it a coincidence that it fell at the rate of a free fall? By the way, so did the 2 World Trades. I had friends in those World Trades. I had been to the World Trades. It's too bad you can't go to them now, but isn't it a coincidence that they fell at free fall speed? Is it a coincidence? I mean, should I just keep going with this stuff, okay? Is it a coincidence that there's no plane wreckage at the Pentagon? Is it a coincidence that they just covered the front of the Pentagon lawn with dirt within 40 minutes after the supposed plane crash thing, okay? Are these just coincidences? Is it a coincidence that they were running NORAD, that's North American Radar Air Defense, was running drills that day that brought most of the fighter aircraft to the northwestern part of the United States? How did a guy in a cave do that one, huh? You know? Is it a coincidence, folks, that you've been lied to? Is it a coincidence that you've been lied to many times? Is it a coincidence that this was used by people to take away your liberties? Remember, you were attacked because of our freedom, and look who's taking those freedoms away. It's not El Qaeda. Oh, they call it, that's right, Al-Qaeda, right? El Qaeda. Is it a coincidence, once again, that just like in the James Bond movie Goldfinger, that they were fortunate enough to get 25% of the world's oil production off the market? Is it a coincidence that Saddam Hussein, the person we sold the gas that he gassed his own people with, that's right, we manufactured and we distributed the biological and chemical warfare agents to that person? Is it a coincidence we put him in power? Is it a coincidence that we overthrew Mossadegh? Okay, but once again, is it a coincidence that Saddam said, I don't want my transactions in dollars in the year 2000? Would that have gone against our big globalist bankers, the Federal Reserve people? Would that have been a coincidence? Boy, the last coincidence like that was John Fitzgerald Kennedy, when he authorized the creation of United States notes instead of Federal Reserve notes. Maybe that was just a coincidence. Are these all just coincidences? Let's see. Is it a coincidence that the Taliban arrived here in the year 2000 so that they could negotiate with the oil companies? I'm talking world-sized oil companies like ConocoPhillips, you know, Dutch Royal Shell. And what were they negotiating over? A pipeline. Is it a coincidence that that pipeline's been built today? And you got to know that it's your boys and girls guarding it, and you're paying for it. Oh, by the way, you're paying for everything. Is it a coincidence? Okay? Is it a coincidence that the Taliban said no, they didn't want the pipeline there? Well, I wonder why we attacked Afghanistan. Is it a coincidence that the head negotiator for the oil companies is now the president of Afghanistan? This is what you're allowing. This is why I'm on your television, because you won't get off your derrieres and get up and fight for the freedom and liberty, okay, that you grew up with. That's why I'm here today, because to me it's not a coincidence, okay? I've learned enough to figure out that, hey, it's not a coincidence when all this stuff happens, okay? This is playing chess. This is the grand... Is it a coincidence that now torture's okay in the United States? Is it a coincidence that they've now authorized the fabrication, and they're already built, the detention camps with train tracks going in them and special trains so you can chain people to them? Is that a coincidence? Is this the first time in history or just a coincidence? Is it a coincidence that Prescott Bush, George's grandfather, was the #1 Nazi in the United States of America and had his assets frozen by Congress? Look up the McCormick-Dickstein Committee and find out what they did, okay? So, gee, is it a coincidence, okay, that the guy who ran the CIA, that's right, his name was Bush. Is it a coincidence, okay, that your media has lied to you over and over and over and over about torture, about secret prisons, about how you have to give up your rights and your freedoms? Is that just a coincidence? Is it a coincidence there are cameras on your highways now? Is it a coincidence that they want to chip you like a dog? Okay? Is it a coincidence that, you can't, no more making fun or making jokes in line? Is it a coincidence that the mayor or governor of Springfield, it's either Springfield or Worcester, he's getting black uniforms for all his policemen? Funded by your tax dollars, a federal grant. Is it a coincidence we're giving automatic weapons to our police? Is it a coincidence, okay, that when Katrina happened, we couldn't get anybody there in 72 hours? Is it a coincidence that we now have a private military group called Blackwater, that's right, mercenaries, walking on the streets of the United States? Is it a coincidence that they have attack helicopters? Is it a coincidence they're now buying fighter aircraft? Is it a coincidence that are they working for you? They're not answerable to the United States people, kind of like the CIA, huh? Is it a coincidence, okay, that Afghanistan right now is back in opium production and heroin's, readily plentiful? 93% of the world's opium comes out of that country. That's right. Is it a coincidence that the CIA has been known since, what, the 50s and 60s for moving drugs for money? Is it a coincidence that they did Iran-Contra? Is it a coincidence that George's dad was the head of the CIA and they're doing this? Once again, flying into Mena, Arkansas with good old who? Bill Clinton. Is it a coincidence that we're told there's only two parties? Is it a coincidence? I mean, come on, folks. Is it a coincidence that your presidential candidates are all backed and banked by Goldman Sachs? Is it a coincidence that every one of your Treasury secretaries has been backed by, as a Goldman Sachs ex-employee? Is it a coincidence for you, okay, that they tell you, oh, we want a strong dollar, yet they print the stuff like it's going out of style? Is it a coincidence that they had to, we're the world's greatest debtor nation? Is that a coincidence? Is it a coincidence that they've just decimated our whole manufacturing capabilities? Is it a coincidence that they passed new bankruptcy laws after a period of great liquidity? Once again, they create the problem, and then, they already know the problem's coming, so then they change the bankruptcy laws. Is it a coincidence your neighbors can't get out of debt? Is it a coincidence that, the cost of everything is going up? No. The purchasing power of your dollar may be going down. Wake up, viewers. You're Sharon viewers. You're smart people. This is not the first time in history. Did this happen to Germany? Has this happened to anybody else? Let's see. Gosh, should I tell you about Korea? Should I tell you about Mexico? Should I tell you about Russia? Is it a coincidence when you continuously print fiat currency that the value of that currency goes down, and in so doing it enslaves the populace? It hurts the young people and it hurts the old. And of course, yes, those in the middle working. You think that's a coincidence? So, back to my 9/11 thing, because you wanted to know, right? You're like, hey, guy came on, and he said, it's just a coincidence, all this 9/11 stuff, Once again, is it a coincidence that there's no wreckage in Shankville, Pennsylvania? Is it a coincidence that the coroner said, I didn't even find a drop of blood, where are the bodies or body parts? Is it a coincidence that the mayor of Shanksville said, hey, there's no plane? Is it a coincidence that the first people at the Pentagon said, where's the plane? Like the little short guy with no neck. Boss, the plane, the plane. Maybe it's just a coincidence, right? Once again, is it a coincidence they were running drills about, planes hitting the Pentagon? Why would that be a coincidence? Just think, if you could compartmentalize a project so that even when people answered the phone, the first thing they said was, is this real or is this exercise? Maybe that's just a coincidence. When you think of, here's the Boston Logan Tower, in this case, it's up out of New Hampshire where we have our FAA, the Fiends Against Aviation, comedy. Where I'm going with it is the FAA traffic controllers are actually in Nashua, New Hampshire, but they're considered Logan. And so, boy, is it an incident? I mean, is it a coincidence that when they called and they said, NORAD, we have an emergency here in Boston, and NORAD replied with, is this real or exercise? Was it a coincidence that there were operations going on, training operations, so that they'd have all these fictitious targets on the radar screens, on everybody's screen? That's just a coincidence, right? Yeah. How did the guy in a cave do that again? So anyway, maybe it's just a coincidence, that the Secret Service, while the United States is under attack, didn't move the president or move him to a different location, even though everyone knew in advance because he has a schedule where he'd be. Boy, guess it was a coincidence he could read about goats that day. And you think that there's a difference when you elect a Democrat. You're all going to go out there and embrace Obama because you think you're going to get a change. I got news for you. Your sad awakenings a year from now. A year from now, when I come back on the TV like I am now and I say, hey, remember a year ago I showed you 9/11 information? Remember a year ago I asked questions? Remember a year ago I said they're going to use this to increase the police state and take away your rights of yourself and your children? And now it's a year later, and have they done what I said they would do? Did they pass the Military Commissions Act, where you no longer have a jury of your peers? They got rid of habeas corpus. Was it a coincidence? Did they now say we can torture your children, take your wife off the street without telling anyone, and give her no recourse, no jury of her peers, no make a phone call, no innocent until proven guilty, no, hey, can I have some fresh air? Is it a coincidence now that the #1 documentary movie that won the Oscar this year has to do with Americans torturing people? Why don't you go get the movie? It's called Taxi Cab to the Dark Side. Is that a coincidence? Do you get it yet? Do you see what these people are doing? And you're allowing it. You're allowing it, and it's going to bite you in the derriere, and it's going to bite your children. All because, what? You want to remember things like the Holocaust, but you're not willing to stop when it starts. This is a wake-up call for you listeners. It's time to get off your butts. This isn't a coincidence. Torturing people's wrong. Is it a coincidence that 300 people have died from being tasered? Do you know what pain compliance means? And I'm sure it's just a coincidence. Is it a coincidence that the federal government's paying so that they can set up roadblocks and checkpoints and condition you to being pulled over and say, there are your papers? Is that a coincidence? I wouldn't be so upset if I didn't know that the clown's granddad was a stinking, think about it, Hey, is it a coincidence the Department of Homeland Security is headed up by a guy who has dual citizenship? Chertoff? Is it a coincidence that they hired a guy from the East German Stasi as #2? Is it a coincidence that the guy #3 is from the KGB? You think that's a coincidence? How about this? You think it's a coincidence that 23 of the top Homeland Security guys resigned? You think it's a coincidence that they fired all those attorney generals? You think it's, come on, folks. Wake up. This is your Sharon wake-up call. Wake up, You're not going to let it happen here because you are going to wake up. You're going to be the only community that gives a damn. While the rest of the community sleeps and watches the boob tube, and thinks everything's okay. Yeah, I don't buy food and I don't buy fuel. They're not taking me out, Gee, once again, maybe this television show is just a bad dream. And maybe all of this is just a coincidence. Did you ever hear of Operation Northwoods, where they're going to shoot down an American plane and blame it on somebody else? Was that a coincidence? Look it up. Do you realize we've shot down an Iranian airliner full of, passengers? Not an F-14 Tomcat that we sold them, but is that a coincidence? How many times can we poke and prod and, get someone to go? Is it a coincidence that everybody in the media is trying to tell you to go after Iran, Go after Iran. Ahmadinejad, it's a bad guy. Is it a coincidence he went to school over here? This is what they need. This is what is it a coincidence? How about this one? Okay, you've got Obama, right? And who's his, let me ask you, is it a coincidence that his security advisor is Zbigniew Brzezinski, the guy who said, let's take Americans' tax dollars, okay, and we'll turn around and we'll foment and we'll fund Islamic fundamentalism? Okay, yeah, I guess it's just a coincidence. I guess he was the one who got what? Who got the, the Islamic fundamentalists to attack the, come on, the Russians, but that was just a coincidence. He's now your security advisor to Obama. He was also for Carter, okay, and that's why I say, what was he involved in? Is it a coincidence he wrote the Grand Chess Game? Is it a coincidence that you didn't get off your rear and read it and find out what this guy is about? He told you in '96 he was going to be doing this, and they're doing it now. So, is it a coincidence that Saddam said he didn't want his transactions in dollars? Who did that bother? Is it a coincidence that the mission's accomplished, yet the occupation goes on? Why do you call it the Iraq War? It's the Iraq occupation. How many millions of Iraqis are you willing to kill based on lies? Hey, I'm asking you. You know, if that was Israel that they were attacking, you'd all be off your stinking couches and screaming. But I guess it's okay if somebody else, because they have what, a darker skin, speak a different language, because you bought the lie from the liars who lie to you constantly? Remember, they're not listening to your phone calls. We're only listening to foreign phone calls. Don't have to worry about it, Americans. Go back to sleep. And then they get caught. So they lied to you, you Sharonite. Okay? Then they said, we don't torture people. And then they get caught torturing. And it's not the little, hey, make a naked, triangle party. How about acid enemas? Wake up, people. They're killing people. And they're doing it under your name. And it's not a coincidence. And you're sitting on your butts. Okay? And then when they had secret prisons, and they said, we don't have secret prisons. Your president's got to get up in September and say, well, we're going to close them. That's no coincidence, folks. This is what they do. Okay? It's not a coincidence. Okay? Is it a coincidence that they authorized putting aspartame in your food? That's right. Thank you, Donald Rumsfeld. Thank you, Searle Corporation. Is it a coincidence that the FDA approved it after denying it twice because it was a known carcinogenic causing cancer, listed as a chemical warfare agent by the Department of Defense? Aren't you glad you had Donald Rumsfeld, huh? You think it's a coincidence that Baker went over to Iraq and said you need a surge? Well, maybe it's a coincidence because James Baker's a member of the Carlyle Group with the Royal Saudi family and also Bush and Company, and your clown stinking ex-governor Mitt Romney with his Bain Capital. Yeah, they're invested in the Carlyle Group. You know, if you follow the money, a lot of times you can find the truth. You should be watching, you should be waking up. You're a Sharonite. Grow some stinking huevos. You know, I'm getting a little bit upset with you, but that was why I came here today. I came here because it had been about a year. And about a year ago, I told you, you know, things don't smell right. We've been lied to, and over that year, we found out we have been lied to. The Patriot Act. Nobody read it, but they all signed it. You all wrapped yourself in an American flag and said, we're going to go kill those people because they speak a different language. Who started Al-Qaeda? Where did Al-Qaeda come from? It's El-Qaeda, folks. You're being taken down the tubes, and you're being taken down financially, you're being taken down morally, you're being taken down, more than financial and moral. There's one other one I want to get with you, you know. Oh, forget, the world thing. You're playing the empire game, okay? Germany did this. Remember they said Poland attacked them, and it was staged? Well, I'm here to tell you, folks, you've been staged, you've been had, you've been played, okay? And you're all dumbed down because you got your stupid big box, okay? You're probably watching me on your $11,000 high-def TV, and you're thinking, I'm okay because it doesn't bother me, you know? Well, when they start arresting your kids and putting them in those trains, okay, because your kid was at the wrong party, your kid said the wrong word, that's what you wanted. Well, your apathy got you that. That's right. Your apathetic thing. You're just too lazy to get off your derrieres and Sharon and do anything. What a shame. You shame me. I'm ashamed to even say, you know, where are all the real men? Where are the men who are out there saying, hey, you know what? I've got family, I love them, I want to make sure that they have rights, that they have freedoms, okay? And it's not something that some government's going to give you. If you bother reading the paper, you have them anyway. But if you allow someone to take them out and take them away and tell you it's just a privilege, then you're going to live the life that they lived in Germany. You'll live the life that slaves lived back in the days of Rome. You'll have that quality life that they have in China, where they harvest people's organs. But they're your first member nation status trading partner, aren't they? Pick up any piece of crud, it's made in China, and these are people that harvest their people's organs. Yeah, let's go send a group over to China so they can go out, kiss their derrieres, okay? I mean, you amaze me. You're Sharonites, and you don't like to read, and if someone tells you the truth, you go into denial. Well, no, that can't be. Torture? No, not us. Secret prisons? Oh, no. I mean, it can come out in the stinking Wall Street Journal. It can come out in the New York Times. It can come out on your TV, but you know what? It's okay with you because they're not doing it to Israel. Yeah, that's all right, right? As long as we're not taking people from Israel and putting them in secret prisons, as long as we're not taking people from Israel. I mean, come on, Sharonites. Start waking up that if you allow them to do it to anyone, it won't be long before they do it to you. This is the time to get off your rears. This is the time to stand up. This is the time to save this republic. It's not a democracy. And if you think I'm wrong, why don't you recite the Pledge of Allegiance? Why don't you read the Constitution? Why don't you read the Bill of Rights, okay? And tell me if the word democracy shows up once in there, okay? Want to read the Declaration of Independence? I don't think it says democracy. You're allowing it to slip away. You got to change. You got to take on some responsibility. You got to do what our forefathers did. You got to do what all the people we call patriots did. I want to say it was Thomas Jefferson who said that dissension is the greatest form of patriotism. What did he know? Was that just a coincidence? Yeah. I thought it was about time I did a review for you. So once again, we can go over more 9/11 stuff if you want, is it a coincidence that the guy who supposedly hit the Pentagon, first off, there's no wreckage, but more importantly, he took a 330-degree turn before he hit it when he could have just kamikazed it, let alone took out Rumsfeld. If you're going to take the Pentagon, you figure you know which side you're hitting, Oh, God, You folks, is it a coincidence that as soon as they found the gold for the Bank of Nova Scotia in the rubble, they pulled everybody off the pile? Is it a coincidence that the FDA, that's right, the EPA, okay, Christine Todd Whitman, said the air is fine down here in, Manhattan. Hey, is it a coincidence, that all the first responders are dying? Is it a coincidence that, we were told everything's fine? What did our Treasury Secretary say? Go out and buy an SUV? Is it a coincidence they got you to buy an SUV and then they jacked up your fuel prices? Is it a coincidence that these people are having secret fuel meetings with the likes of all the Enron people, let alone the stinging Taliban with the pipeline, and all this stuff was set up in advance? It's just a coincidence. And they're coming out as what? Trillionaires out of this game? Yeah, why don't you bleed some more for them? Why don't you send your children and your daughters over? Oh, is it a coincidence that they put scanners in your airports now that basically, show your genitalia to them? Yeah, because your government has to look at your genitals before they let you get on a plane. Is it a coincidence that you sheeple put up with it? Is it a coincidence that it used to be the land of the free and home of the brave, and now a land of the slave and home of the coward? Come on, what are you going to put your daughter through the scanner first, or your mother? You want to send your wife through there, or your little son? Because the TSA needs to look at their genitals? That's what you want? Well, that's what you got, because it's only a coincidence. Don't worry. Eventually, you never know. They may pull me off the air, and when they do, you can think, yeah, I saw this guy on my TV once. But that was just a coincidence. What's a year? 365 days. What have we learned? As Lenin said, and what have we done? Another year older, a new one begun. They're choosing your candidates. They hide anyone real. They control your elections and make you use electronic voting machines. The vote then gets rigged, but you all sit back and say, oh, well, there's nothing you can do. I guess we're sending your children to hell. I mean, come on, folks. You know, is it a coincidence that Diebold and stuff, you know, that when they have elections with Diebolds and stuff, you know, you get 17,000 negative votes, that, you know, you have 30% swings in the, between polls and what the actual voting is? I guess it's just a coincidence. Is it a coincidence that that whole thing in Florida, okay, with the other election, okay, when they decided we need to help America vote, so we'll create the Help America Vote Act. And what did that do? That took your tax money to make what? To make corporations like Diebold really rich, making machines that get their incumbent buddies in. Is it a coincidence that your representatives like Kerry and Kennedy voted for the new bankruptcy laws, voted for the war? Is it a coincidence that they tell you now, oh, conveniently he's got a brain tumor? Well, maybe that explains his voting, right? You know, is it a coincidence? Come on, folks. You know, you have to do something. I'm up here because I'm trying to get you off your derrieres. You got to be more than you are. And how do you do that? Start doing the right thing. Do the right thing for your family. Do the right thing, you know, for your neighbors. Wake them up. Tell them to watch the show. Read the credits. You know, watch something different. Like I said, maybe you want to watch an Oscar-winning documentary. It's so bad that now they're making documentary movies about the United States government torturing people to death. But as long as you have your tube and everything's okay, you don't care. It's just a coincidence. It can't be real. It's not real unless you let it be real. You know, maybe you can hide, because that's how this country was formed, by people who hid. They didn't, you know. Tyranny? I don't see any tyranny. And as George Bush once said, I'm glad I'm with my base, the haves and the have-mores. Then there was the, oh, there's no weapons of mass destruction here. Oh, they're not under there. He used it as a joke while he spent your money and killed your children. And at the same time, I hate to bum you out, but when I say they're putting poisons in your food, you think I'm kidding when I talk about GMO? You think I'm kidding when I talked about aspartame? Why don't you look it up? You know? It's one thing for me to rant. It's another for you to even look something up. You know? Hey, is it a coincidence that the BBC reporter reported 20 minutes before the building collapsed that Building 7 collapsed? Is it a coincidence that CNN did the same thing? And the guy turned around, being from New York, and he goes, it's about to collapse. I guess it's just a coincidence. It's a coincidence, once again, that all those SEC records were lost. It's a coincidence that all the evidence went. Hey, how about this? Who cleaned up the mess in New York? Could it have been controlled demolitions? That's a coincidence. Why would I name a company Controlled Demolitions? Hey, I got one for you. Hey, it's a crime scene, right? Is it a coincidence that Giuliani had all the steel shipped out? So what, the Chinese could sell some more junk? There you have it, folks. You know? Yeah, and you were going to elect him president. Oh, Giuliani, he's going to protect us. He's for Israel. Ah. It amazes me the power of the conditioning of the boob tube, I guess. Because they've conditioned people. I think they've done a pretty good job of dumbing down. Don't ask questions. Who does investigative journalism? Only me. That's tonight's show. That was like 9/11 remembered. You know, it's just a coincidence theory.